When looking at the overall Kafka architecture from a producer and cluster perspective, consider that a Kafka cluster is broken up into things we call brokers. And brokers not only have leaders that represent who's able to communicate and stream from a specific topic, it's also a means of establishing replication. In this example, I'm back to having a single topic with 3 different partitions, but I have 2 brokers. And so that way that works from a clustering perspective is that if I set some level of replication, and here I've done a theoretical replication of 2 brokers, consider that each partition needs to be replicated to at least one other cluster. And in this given example, partitions 0 and 1 are primarily represented on broker 1, with partition 2 being owned by the second broker. So from a producer standpoint, if I generate an event, it can go to 2 particular places depending on which broker is the leader for a given partition. In terms of replication though, consider that Kafka doesn't consider the event complete until that information has been replicated to another broker depending on the replication strategy. That means that if I produce an event onto my topic and it goes to partition 0, it won't consider that complete until partition 0 has had that event replicated over, in this case, to broker 2. This is critical to understand in terms of scalability when it comes to what we call rebalancing. Originally, while we only had 2 brokers, it's now possible to add in a 3rd broker, another Kafka instance, to this Kafka cluster, which will cause the partitions to rebalance for each topic. In this case, if we add a 3rd broker and we're still leaving the replication level at 2, that means we can actually store more physical information because we now have an entirely different broker to store things. Before, when I only had 2 brokers, I had 1 broker that had to have 2 partitions on it. Now with 3 brokers, it's possible to have 1 partition for each broker. So that broker 1 now has partition 0, and 0 gets replicated over to broker 2. Broker 2 now represents partition 2, which is replicated over to broker 1, and the new broker 3 is handling partition 1, and it gets replicated over to partition 2. This level of rebalancing takes some additional time. Consider that if you have a very large cluster with a lot of information, it can take a considerable amount of time in order to rebalance all of the data across all the different clusters. An important consideration when doing this type of rebalancing though, because you're generally going to add more brokers for more capacity or performance, is that if you have a lot of data currently on your cluster, it can take it a significant amount of time to be able to rebalance because it is actually moving the information that is stored on the individual topic partitions across to other brokers within inside the cluster. It is this rebalancing though which allows this continual scaling by being able to add and subtract brokers